All right, in Unit 2, Section 4, we are talking about properties and operations, and then we'll also get into some conversions. So first thing, and this is just copied out of your book, is a table with some of the properties on it. So these have, or this table has the commutative and associative properties. And for each one of those, we have an addition version of it and a multiplication version of it. So if you look first at the commutative property of addition, it says that in a sum, you can add the numbers in any order. So when we're adding numbers, the order doesn't matter. So here's your example. 4 plus -7 is the same thing as -7 plus 4. That's the commutative property. It doesn't matter if we switch the order, it's still going to give us the same thing. So then the commutative property of multiplication is the same thing, just with multiplication instead of addition. So when we're multiplying numbers, the order does not matter. So 8 times -5 is going to give us the same thing as -5 times 8. The associative property has to do with grouping numbers. So the associative property of addition is when we change the grouping of the numbers, the sum does not change. So if you look at our example, our parentheses go from around 9 plus 6 to changing to around 6 plus 2. But either way, we'd get the same answer. No matter which way we did it, we would still wind up with 17. Then the associative property of multiplication says the same thing, but with multiplication instead of addition. So on our example, on the left side, we have the parentheses around 3 times 10, and on the right side, we have the parentheses around 10 times 4, but either way, we'll still wind up with the same answer of 120 if we work that out. Some other properties that are in your book but didn't make it into that table. The first one is the identity property of addition. The identity property of addition just says that if I take any number and add 0 to it, my sum is that number. So 7 plus 0 equals 7, just like a million plus 0 equals a million. Any number plus 0 is just that number. Then the same property, the identity property, can also be applied to multiplication. So what that says is that any number times 1 is going to give me that same number. So -9 times 1 is equal to -9. If I had 400 times 1, I would get 400. So those are two more properties to go with the commutative and associative properties. So if you look at this section, the directions say to identify the property illustrated by the statement. So our first one is parentheses 14 times 7 times x is equal to 14 times parentheses 7 times x. So first off, we know that it's going to be a multiplication property. And then if you look, we have grouping symbols. We have these parentheses that get changed, their location changes. So we know that that's the associative property of multiplication. On the next one, we have 18 to the third power plus 0 equals 18 to the third. So we know that that property is saying that anytime we add 0 to something, we just get that number. So that's going to be the identity property of addition. Number 3 says -525 times 1 is equal to -525. So we're multiplying a number times 1 and winding up with the same number. That's the identity property of multiplication. Number 4 says -15 plus 12 is equal to 12 plus -15. We have parentheses around this -15, but we're not changing grouping. That's just to separate the plus sign from the negative sign. So all we're doing here is flipping the order of addition. So that's the commutative property of addition. If you look at the next part, it says using properties of addition and multiplication. It says evaluate the expression using mental math, justify each of your steps. So I know it says mental math, but I'm actually going to write steps just to kind of show you my thinking. So the commutative property of addition tells me that the order doesn't matter. So if I wanted to, I could do 17 plus 23 first and then add 32. So I can flip that order because I know 17 plus 23 will easily get me to 40, and then 40 plus 32 is 72. So it's a little bit easier way to think about it. For number 2, in my head, I can multiply 4 times -25 first, because I know 4 times -25 is -100, and then -100 times 9 is -900. So just using properties to kind of rearrange things and make it a little bit easier to do the math. On the back side, there's two more examples, number 3 and number 4. I want you to go ahead and try those. Again, I know it says mental math, but go ahead and write out your steps so I can see your thinking, or Ms. Twami can see your thinking of how you rearrange the numbers to make it a little bit easier. All right, once you're done with that, you can move on to the next part. And again, we have evaluate the expression. We've done that in almost every section in Unit 2. It says evaluate the expression when A equals 10, B equals -4, and C equals -2. So we're going to plug in numbers for variables, and we're going to look at using the properties to make it a little bit easier. So I'm going to replace A with 10. So I have 10 squared times -4, which is B, times -2 squared, because C is -2. So 10 squared is 100. And I have -4. -2 times -2 is +4. Because it's easy to multiply by 100, I might want to multiply -4 times 4 first and get -16. And then my final answer will be -1600. Because again, I know multiplying by 100, I just have to add 2 zeros. For number 2, I have 3b plus 5a plus -6c. So I have 3 times -4 in for b, plus 5 times 10 in for a, plus I have -6, and then I replace c with -2. So I'm going to do my multiplication first. So I have -12 plus 50 plus +12. And here I can put -12 next to +12 and do that first because I know that's just going to cancel out to make 0. So my final answer will be 50. So again, plugging in the numbers for the variables and then using properties to make it easier to work it out. I'm going to leave number 3 for you to try. I'm going to skip down and do number 4. So we have 9a squared plus 9b times 25. So I have 9. I plug in 10 for a, plus 9, plug in -4 for b, times 25. So I need to do exponents. So 10 times 10 is 100. Then I can also say that it would be easier to do -4 times 25 first. Because thinking in terms of money, I know if I have 4 quarters, that's 100 or $1. And I know it's going to be negative there. So then I can multiply and get 900 plus -900. And those will cancel each other out and make 0. Okay, so again, try number 3 on your own. If you have questions, just ask your teacher. The next section says to simplify the expression, and we're using properties to simplify variable expressions. So what we could say for this first one is that we can use the associative property and move our grouping around. So we can put 5 and 9 together and get 14, and then we just have m plus 14. We'll talk about this more later, but I cannot put those together. For number 2, I can use the commutative property and move my multiplication around and just do 3 times 16 first and get 18 and just tack on the k because again I can't do anything with those. For number 3, I can rearrange and put 4 plus -1 plus x. 4 plus -1 is 3 plus x, and that's as far as I can go. And then for number 4, I can rearrange the grouping symbols. I can put the grouping around 21 times 3, and then just have t left over. That'll give me -63t. And then on the last page, we're looking at multiplying by conversion factors. So we're converting from one unit to the next. You've probably done this in math and or science before. And I know for a lot of you, you can do this really quickly in your head. But what we're working on is the process of using a conversion factor. So these first examples will probably be pretty easy, but I need you to show your work the same way that it's done on here, so that when we move on to harder problems in the future, you'll be able to show your work and get the right answer. So it says to use a conversion factor to perform the indicated conversion. So we want to turn 27 yards into feet. So the way we're going to do this, we're going to start by writing 27 yards over 1. So that's our first step. Then we're going to multiply by our conversion factor. My conversion factor is that 1 yard equals 3 feet. So what I need to do is since yards are on the numerator of the first fraction, I need yards on the denominator of the next one. So 1 yard is the same thing as 3 feet. So right now, before I do anything else out, anything else, I can cancel out yards, because if I have yards on the top and yards on the bottom, they divide out to just 1 and cancel each other out. So now my only unit that I have left is feet, which is what I want. I can do 27 times 30. I get 81 feet. So 27 yards is the same thing as 81 feet. Looking at our next example, we're going to turn 160 kilometers into, oh, sorry about that. We're going to turn 160 kilometers into meters. So I start by writing 160, I'm going to abbreviate kilometers over 1. Then I need to multiply by my conversion factor. I know that 1 kilometer is equal to 1,000 meters. Kilometers are in the numerator of the first one, so they need to be in the denominator of the second one. So 1 kilometer is equal to 1,000 meters. At this point, I can cancel out the kilometers because one's in the numerator, one's in the denominator, and then I can just multiply across. So I'll get 160,000 meters. Now this is a great example of, I know you could do this in your head, but I need you to practice doing the conversion factor so you can have that for the future. All right, I'm going to leave the last one for you. You're turning seconds into minutes. Please use the model that I showed you on the 2 problems before and work it out that way. And then you also have some review problems that involve order of operations on the first 3, and then the coordinate plane on the last 4. When it says describe the location of the point, that means you're going to say what quadrant it's in, or if it's on an axis, you're going to say what axis it's on. So for instance, 4, 3 would be in quadrant 1. So I would just write quadrant 1. Okay, so do the same thing for 2, 3, and this should say number 4. All right, if you have any questions, as always, ask your teacher. This is the end of the Unit 2, Section 4 video.